Welcome to the Explainer. So let's just get right into it, because humanity has always been utterly fascinated and, frankly, terrified by the end of the world. I mean, across generations and cultures, we constantly ask, how does it all end? Today, we're unpacking two distinct, deeply fascinating frameworks for doomsday. First, we have the secular calculations of the global scientific community. And second, we have the ancient doctrines drawn directly from biblical scripture. Both born of global catastrophe, for sure, but as you're going to see, their timelines and ultimate conclusions literally couldn't be more different. 85. Now, you might be wondering, what exactly does that number mean? Well, according to the Bulletin of the Atomic Scientists, in 2026, humanity is sitting at exactly 85 seconds to midnight on the Doomsday Clock. Let that sink in for a second. Out of all modern history, this is the absolute closest we have ever been to a civilization-ending catastrophe. Okay, let's dive into this with Section 1, counting down to midnight. To really grasp the weight of that 85-second warning, we have to go back to 1947. Scientists from the Manhattan Project, the very people who actually built the atomic bomb, felt this profound moral obligation to warn the public about what they'd created. So they came up with this clock, and it's wild to see how much the hands have fluctuated based purely on human behavior. It debuted at 7 minutes to midnight. By 1953, during the hydrogen bomb testing, it jumped to just 2 minutes. But then, at the end of the Cold War in 1991, we all kind of breathed a collective sigh of relief at 17 minutes away. Today, we've blown right past minutes. 2026 gives us an unprecedented 85 seconds. But here's the thing, and Rachel Bronson, the CEO of the Bulletin, makes sure to point this out: the clock is essentially a metaphor. This board of Nobel laureates isn't sitting around predicting a specific date and time for the apocalypse. No, it's more of a highly visible alarm system, ringing as loud as possible to warn politicians and the public about human-made technologies that are just spiraling totally out of our control. That brings us to Section 2, the threat multipliers. So what exactly is pushing those hands forward right now? The Bulletin's experts analyze this incredibly complex web of global dangers, breaking them down into 3 primary threat multipliers. The first, and the oldest, is nuclear risk. The second is the escalating crisis of climate change. And the third, which is this newly emerging threat, is disruptive technology and artificial intelligence. You see, these aren't isolated problems. They overlap, creating a highly volatile global environment. It's like a giant puzzle of compounding risks. Take our nuclear anxieties, for instance. With the expiration of the New START treaty, there is very little preventing a runaway global nuclear arms race, really for the first time in half a century. Add in unchecked hypersonic weapons that can easily evade traditional defenses, and the risk just skyrockets. But the absolute most terrifying part? Experts warn that with global tensions running this high, nations might actually just stumble into an accidental nuclear war through a simple, tragic miscalculation. And, this risk of miscalculation is drastically increased by our third threat multiplier, disruptive tech. Just listen to this powerful quote from Nobel laureate Maria Ressa. She describes our current digital landscape as an information Armageddon. Disinformation and unregulated AI are fueling what the World Health Organization literally calls an infodemic. And the core issue is, if we can't agree on basic facts, we can't trust each other. That leaves us completely paralyzed in our ability to cooperatively solve complex existential issues like climate change and nuclear disarmament. Moving right along to Section 3, a historic wake-up call. Now, this paralysis isn't just theoretical. We've actually seen it play out. Take the COVID-19 pandemic. The Bulletin explicitly stated they didn't view COVID-19 as civilization ending in itself, but rather they called it a starter pandemic. It was this brutal, historic wake-up call that exposed our inability to handle threats cooperatively. Instead of massive international collaboration, we saw this massive retreat into nationalism. Honestly, it proved that if a truly existential biological threat emerges right now, we are entirely unprepared. But despite this grim assessment, the scientific perspective still holds on to a solid core of optimism. Rachel Bronson frames it perfectly. She argues that because humans built these doomsday problems, the weapons, the emissions, the algorithms, humans fundamentally have the power to fix them. The doomsday clock is a blaring alarm meant to wake us up so we can physically push those hands back. In this view, the Earth's fate rests entirely in human hands. All right, shifting gears completely now, let's explore Section 4, the biblical tribulation. Let's pivot and look at doomsday through an entirely different lens. Drawing from sermon manuscripts that cover the books of Luke and Mark, a fundamentally contrasting worldview emerges. From a strict biblical standpoint, the Earth's timeline isn't dictated by human politicians, and it's certainly not dictated by carbon emissions. The timeline is and always has been in God's hands, meaning mankind cannot destroy the Earth before God's ordained time, and on the flip side, no human effort can save it once that time actually arrives. Let's move to Konazi and see how this builds. This theological doomsday is referred to as the Tribulation, a period of absolutely unparalleled global devastation. Based on Scripture, this breaks down into 3 distinct phases. First is cosmic fallout, where massive signs in the sun, moon, and stars disrupt the Earth. This directly leads to Phase 2, global panic, characterized by massive, widespread distress among nations. And finally, Phase 3, divine fulfillment, culminating in the literal return of Christ to establish a brand new earthly kingdom. What's truly striking here is the nature of this environmental devastation. The Scriptures predict catastrophic events, a third of all trees completely destroyed, fresh water supplies turning undrinkable, whole oceans turning to blood. But here's the stark contrast. In the theological view, this devastation is brought about directly by God's miraculous orchestration of judgment. It is not the result of human-made climate change or nuclear fallout. These theological teachings also point back to historical precedents. In Mark 13, Jesus warns of an abomination of desolation. The sermon text explained that for the original readers, this heavily tied into the horrific destruction of Jerusalem and the desecration of its temple by the Romans way back in 70 AD. That past real-world horror essentially serves as a biblical prototype, like a smaller-scale preview of the ultimate global tribulations predicted for the end times. Bringing it all together now, here is Section 5, 2 Perspectives on Doomsday. So, the crucial point is, we have 2 deeply believed yet entirely opposite frameworks for the end of the world. The major difference? It all comes down to control. The secular science framework operates on the firm belief that mankind is the ultimate threat to the Earth, and therefore humans control the clock. It's a massive call to human responsibility. The theological doctrine, however, teaches that God is entirely in control. Mankind simply does not possess the power to destroy an Earth that God sustains. Honestly, this quote from Pastor Stephen Davyy perfectly captures the theological rebuttal to the Doomsday Clock's core premise. While the scientists are out there looking at nuclear arsenals and carbon footprints, urging humanity to fear its own destructive capabilities, the biblical perspective argues that humanity is simply looking in the wrong direction. The true source of judgment and the only one to be revered and feared in this worldview is the Creator himself. Ultimately, their end goals diverge completely. The Doomsday Clock is a metaphorical warning designed to save the current planet and preserve human civilization indefinitely. The biblical tribulation, on the other hand, is viewed as a literal, inescapable end, not to preserve the current Earth, but as a necessary, destructive step to cleanse the world and usher in an entirely new divine kingdom. We've seen the scientific data, and we've explored the ancient theological doctrines. And you know, the one thing they both universally agree on? Time is running out. The status quo simply cannot hold. So I leave you with this. Whether you view doomsday as a metaphor urging immediate human action, or as a literal sign of approaching divine judgment, what will you do with the time we have left? Think about it. Thanks for learning with me today.